I still remember the look on their faces, the same faces that once laughed when I wore a paper hat and an oily uniform. Back then, I was invisible to them. Just another worker behind a counter, forgotten as soon as their fries went cold. But now, they're sitting across from me in silence. Not because they respect me, but because they finally realize who I am. The irony is, I didn't even plan revenge. Life just circled back in its own quiet way. You laughed when I begged for extra hours. You called me Burger Boy every time I passed your table. You said I'd never make it out of that kitchen. Now, years later, I own the company your parents built, the same one that fired me for being too slow. And here you are, in my office, pretending not to remember. Don't worry. I'm not here to humiliate you. I'm here to finish a deal. Because while you were laughing, I was learning. Funny, isn't it? How the tables turn when you stop chasing revenge and start building something that lasts. But it wasn't always like this. Back then, I was just a kid in a red visor, trying to survive one shift at a time before everything fell apart. I grew up believing hard work could fix anything. My mom used to tell me, it doesn't matter where you start, only where you finish. I clung to that every day I put on my McDonald's uniform before sunrise. The smell of fries would hit before I even clocked in, and the sound of laughter from the dining area always reminded me of what I didn't have. I wasn't embarrassed at first. It was honest work. I needed the money to help Mom with rent after Dad left. She was sick most days, too weak to leave the bed, but she'd still smile and tell me she was proud. That smile kept me going. I remember standing behind the counter watching kids from my high school walk in. They'd order just to laugh at me, taking pictures when they thought I wasn't looking. I'd force a grin, pretending it didn't matter. Deep down it burned. Every word, every smirk, every time they called me Burger Boy felt like another reminder that I was stuck. There was one person I thought was different. Ryan. He'd been my best friend since we were kids. We used to dream big together, talk about building something of our own one day. But when things got tough, he drifted away. He started hanging out with the same people who mocked me. I'd see him across the counter, laughing with them, avoiding my eyes. That hurt more than anything. At night, when the restaurant lights dimmed and the world went quiet, I'd sit outside with a cold burger in my hands, thinking about what I really wanted. I didn't dream of being rich. I just wanted to matter. I wanted to prove that I was more than the job, more than the uniform. I was scared, though. Scared that maybe they were right. That maybe I really was destined to stay behind that counter forever. Some nights I'd lie awake listening to Mom's breathing in the next room, wondering if life would ever change for us. Then I'd remember her voice again, soft but steady. Keep your head down, Ethan. Keep going. So I did. I kept showing up, kept wiping tables, kept telling myself it was temporary. I didn't know it then, but those long, quiet shifts would become the beginning of everything that came next. It started small, the kind of moments you brush off because you don't want to believe people can be that cruel. Ryan stopped replying to my messages. When I finally saw him at school, he acted like nothing was wrong, but his eyes flicked around the room like he didn't want anyone to see him talking to me. I told myself he was just busy. I wanted to believe that. One afternoon, I was on shift when he walked in with a group of our old classmates. They were laughing loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear. Ryan avoided my eyes at first, but the others didn't. They grinned like wolves. One of them leaned on the counter and said, "Hey Ethan, you missed a spot." He pointed at a ketchup stain on the floor and waited. Everyone was watching. I swallowed hard and forced a smile. "Yeah, I'll get that." Then another voice came from behind, sharper. "Hey Ryan, you weren't kidding. He really does work here." The laughter that followed was the kind that cuts through you, not because it's loud, but because it's honest. They weren't pretending. They really thought I was beneath them. Ryan didn't stop them. He just laughed too. That was the first crack in whatever friendship we had left. A few weeks later, the main betrayal came. I'd been saving to start a small side project with Ryan, an idea we'd dreamed up years ago about a mobile food service for students. He told me he'd been talking to some investors, that they were interested, and that he'd take care of everything. I trusted him completely. One morning, I saw a post online about a new student delivery app launching under a different name. The logo looked familiar. The concept was exactly ours. And right there, smiling in the promo photo, was Ryan standing beside one of the guys who used to mock me. I called him, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. He picked up after the third ring, sounding bored. "Ryan, what is this?" "What's what?" he said. "Our idea. You used it. You told me we'd build it together." He sighed. "Look, Ethan, it's just business. You were never really in a position to make it happen. You work at McDonald's, man. I needed people who could actually move things forward." For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. The restaurant around me blurred. I heard the fryer hiss, the beep of the register, the chatter of customers. Everything kept moving, but I was stuck in that one moment. I finally said, "You could have at least told me." He laughed and said, Don't take it personal. Everyone starts somewhere, right? Then he hung up. I just stood there, the phone pressed to my ear long after the call ended. I felt something in me collapse, not anger, not yet, just this heavy silence. That night it rained. I walked home soaked, the smell of grease and wet asphalt clinging to me. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the wall, replaying his words over and over. You work at McDonald's, man. I kept asking myself if he was right. Maybe I wasn't meant for more. Maybe I was fooling myself thinking I could ever be different. But then I thought of Mom. How she'd always say, don't let what they see define what you are. I wanted to believe her. I needed to. Still, that night something changed. A quiet anger began to form, the kind that doesn't shout or break things. It just burns slow, the kind that waits. I remember the night everything shifted. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, lights off, fast food uniform still on, my hands smelling faintly of grease. I had just come home from another 12-hour shift, exhausted, humiliated, and invisible. Their laughter still echoed in my head, the way they joked about me wasting my life flipping burgers while they moved on to better things. I stared at my reflection in the dark window and whispered, is this it? Is this all I'll ever be? For a long moment, silence answered me. Then something inside me hardened. I thought about every sneer, every mocking grin, every time I'd swallowed my pride just to survive another day. The exhaustion didn't fade, but it changed shape. It became fuel. I stood up, took off that uniform, and promised myself I would never wear it again without a plan to leave it behind. The next morning, I started small. I spent my breaks watching tutorials on business and marketing on my cracked phone screen. I scribbled notes on napkins when no one was looking. When my shift ended, I stayed up late on an old laptop that overheated every hour, trying to understand how companies grew, how they sold, how they built something from nothing. I failed constantly. My ideas fell apart faster than I could build them. I was broke, tired, and alone. But every failure taught me something new. There were nights when I would fall asleep at the table, my head resting on a pile of notes. I'd wake up with ink marks on my face and keep going. I watched others rise faster than me and felt the sting of jealousy, but I used it as a reminder of what was possible. Slowly, painfully, I started to see progress. A small online sale, a returning customer, a word of praise from a stranger who didn't know my past. Each tiny win felt like a sunrise after endless nights. I began to believe again, not because someone told me I could, but because I had proof. I realized that no one was coming to save me. The only person who could rewrite my story was me. I stopped working to escape humiliation and started working to earn respect, especially my own. Every late night, every rejection, every bit of doubt became part of the foundation I was building. The climb was slow, brutal, and lonely, but it was real. One night, as I closed my laptop and looked around my tiny room, I smiled for the first time in months. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I was no longer the person they laughed at. I was the one quietly preparing to prove that I was never the joke. The years that followed tested me in ways I never imagined. But each test left me sharper, stronger, more focused. I started a small side hustle selling affordable business solutions to local vendors. At first, no one cared. Then one day, a small restaurant owner I'd helped pulled me aside and said, "You saved my business." Those 5 words hit harder than any insult I had ever received. For the first time, I realized I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. I was building value. As the months rolled by, my ideas started to take shape. I reinvested every dollar I earned, lived modestly, and worked like I was still that broke kid behind the counter. I studied how companies failed and how a few succeeded. My old uniform, still hanging in my closet, reminded me daily where I started. It wasn't shame anymore, it was fuel. Mini victories came slowly but steadily. My small consultancy began attracting attention from larger businesses. I landed a contract that paid more in 1 month than I used to earn in an entire year at McDonald's. I remember sitting in a meeting, surrounded by executives, realizing I finally belonged in rooms where I once dreamed of standing. Funny how life works. The same people who mocked me were now watching in silence. Some followed me online, liking my posts, pretending they'd always believed in me. Others avoided me completely, afraid to confront what they'd once said. I didn't chase them. I didn't need to. Their silence was its own apology. Inside, I had changed too. I no longer felt the need to prove anything to anyone. I forgave them, not because they deserved it, but because carrying their memory was too heavy. I learned to enjoy the climb, to celebrate progress, and to recognize that success without peace is just another kind of prison. A few years later, opportunity arrived like a quiet storm. The very company those old friends worked for, a struggling retail brand, was on the verge of collapse. I had built enough credibility, connections, and capital to make a move. When the offer came across my desk, I didn't hesitate. I bought the company outright. The first time I walked through its glass doors as the new owner, I felt everything at once. The smell of fresh paint, the sound of my shoes echoing on the floor, the weight of silence from those who once laughed. I had imagined this moment 100 times, but it felt different. Calmer. Quieter. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here to build something better, to create opportunities for others who had once been like me, underestimated and ignored. Still, when I saw the looks on their faces as they realized who now owned their company, I couldn't help but think, funny how life works. Every late night, every rejection, every bruise on my pride had led me to that moment. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was proving them wrong. I was proving myself right. They didn't recognize me at first. When they walked into the conference room, I saw the same careless confidence they always carried back in the day, the kind that comes from believing the world will always bend in your favor. They were pitching a deal, desperate to keep their jobs after the company's financial collapse. I sat at the head of the table, listening quietly, letting them talk. One of them glanced at me mid-sentence, then froze. His eyes narrowed, searching my face as if trying to place a half-forgotten memory. Another followed his gaze, confusion spreading between them. I could almost see the moment recognition hit, that flicker of disbelief, followed by the heavy drop of shame. "You," one of them whispered. "You used to work at McDonald's?" I finished for him, smiling lightly. "Yeah, that was me." The room fell silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioner, the faint rustle of papers on the table. Their confident postures collapsed, replaced by awkward fidgeting and forced smiles. For a second, I saw flashes of the past, their laughter, the way they'd mocked me in front of others, how small I'd felt back then. But none of it hurt anymore. It felt distant, like watching an old film from another lifetime. They stumbled over their words, trying to explain, to smooth things over. "We didn't mean it like that," one of them said. "You were always hardworking." I just nodded. Hard work has a way of paying off eventually. They laughed nervously, unsure how to respond. I leaned back in my chair, calm, in control. I didn't need to raise my voice or prove anything. My presence said everything. The room, once filled with their noise, now belonged to me. As the meeting ended, I stood, extended my hand, and said, "Thank you for coming in. I'll have my team review your proposal." They nodded quickly, eager to leave, faces flushed with embarrassment. As they reached the door, I added quietly, "Funny how things turn around, isn't it?" One of them paused, glanced back at me with eyes full of regret, but said nothing. The door closed behind them, and the silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full, complete, satisfying. I walked over to the window and looked down at the city that had once felt too big for me. I thought about the nights I'd doubted myself, the moments I'd almost given up. This wasn't revenge. It was justice. Quiet, poetic, and perfectly timed. In that moment, I realized the sweetest victories don't come from proving others wrong. They come from proving to yourself that you were always meant for more. A week after that meeting, I drove back to the old McDonald's where it had all started. The parking lot looked smaller than I remembered. The golden arches still glowed faintly in the dusk, casting long shadows across the pavement. I parked for a moment, just watching. Inside, a few workers moved behind the counter, laughing, wiping tables, living the same rhythm I once knew so well. I stepped out of the car and leaned against it, breathing in the familiar scent of fries and coffee. It didn't sting anymore. It felt distant, almost comforting. That place had once been my cage, but now it was just a memory, the place where I learned hunger, humility, and grit. I realized then that I didn't hate the people who mocked me. Their laughter had pushed me forward when nothing else could. If they hadn't doubted me, I might never have found the fire to prove myself. Sometimes silence is the loudest revenge. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that speaks through calm, quiet success. I looked at the building one last time, then smiled and whispered, "Thank you," before driving away. The road ahead felt open, endless, and peaceful. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't chasing approval or payback. I had already won, not because I had more money or power, but because I had finally let go. Life has a strange way of balancing itself. The people who laughed at your struggle often end up learning from your strength. Every insult, every doubt, every moment of silence you endure is just time collecting its debt on your behalf. Patience is the quiet partner of karma. It doesn't shout, it doesn't rush, it simply waits for the right moment to reveal what was always meant to be. Never laugh at someone's struggle, because the world has a way of turning tables when you least expect it. If you found this story meaningful, subscribe for more true stories of karma, redemption, and transformation. Your next favorite story might begin just where this one ends.